Hello, 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 and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I am the founder of Change Light, the creator of the Change Light system, and the host of this show, where I teach you inner work that accelerates your power to change the world and change the world with joy and pleasure and freedom and happiness and fulfillment, and from your place of truth, not struggle and strife and all this crazy stuff that we've got on this planet. Trying to fix that. I know a lot of us are. We're trying to take a lot of humanity out of struggle. And that's my intention here, to do this for you and anyone else who's trying to make a difference in the world. So I am so extremely happy that you're here. In case you haven't seen my previous episodes, please do watch. If I might refer to some things that may not immediately make sense in this episode, but I recommend that you go back and listen to previous episodes in which I talk more specifically about aspects of the Change Light system. The whole Change Light system, the whole purpose is to really clear your inner struggles, reveal your true strengths, and tap into that truth that's inside of you, that light, that truth, that knowing, that incredible presence inside of you that knows who you are and who you're here to be, that is guiding you as best as it can. And that's the whole point of the Change Light system, is to make it easier for your truth to guide you, which makes life a whole lot easier when we're guided by this really wonderful and powerful and spectacular and stupendous and glorious and radiant truth within each of us. You have your own, I have my own. That's what it's all about, really accessing that truth. So in terms of talking about the healing part of things, I talked about healing inner struggles and revealing your strengths. When it comes to healing inner struggles, I want to talk about an absolute requirement. What I have found is an absolute requirement for true healing. And when I say true healing, I mean, I would actually even argue, in some ways you could say that this could apply not just emotionally, because of course I talk about it emotionally, but this could also apply to physically, mentally, in terms of relationships, and, not just inner healing, but also external healing. That there's one absolute necessity that I found in order to affect true healing, inner or outer. And it comes down to one word. And I'm going to break that down, what I mean by this one word and how that applies. That word is safety. Safety is an absolute necessity for healing. And here's why. So I'm going to talk about this in a couple of respects. The first one is, when I mentioned, I'm going to mention some things from other episodes. If you haven't seen them, you should definitely watch them. But I talk about X powers, and X powers, as I define them, are basically anything that feels like it gets in the way of you feeling fully at peace and fully empowered. So the common term that people might say are X powers, it would be blocks, triggers, wounds, parts of the shadow, parts of your ego, anyway, different aspects of the self that basically in some way have been distorted by fear or pain, and as a result are, in their desire to protect us or themselves, unfortunately, they're actually can end up sabotaging us and causing us pain. So a classic one would be an inner critic that's telling you that you're no good, or you're stupid, or you're never going to amount to anything, or that's pushing you to try to succeed and be better and do better. Or, an inner wounded child that's carrying the wounds from having been abused or hurt or manipulated or attacked, or, maybe it was just a simple comment on the playground. I often say that, but it's true. It can seem like the minorest thing that really wounds, the childlike part of us. Or it could be another part of you that's really angry and aggressive and, maybe a defensive, and trying to protect you in that way. So we can have these different types of X powers inside of us. We all have these. I have them. My work has been all about clearing them. So I can tell you, I used to have probably hundreds of them. If you look at the number of drawings I've done, you can probably count them in the hundreds. Now, only occasionally, rarely do they pop up. But my point is that when it comes to X powers, those parts of us that feel like they've fallen into darkness, they've been distorted by fear, by pain, there are 4 Ds, as I call them, of the dark. And this is part of the Change Light system. This is part of what I teach. So those 4 Ds of the dark are basically the Ds, they're 4 words that are the things that cause parts of us to fall into darkness, that cause, that get distorted by fear and pain and cause these powers within us to become X powers, to become parts of us that feel like they work against our power and against our truth and against our ability to feel at peace, or that, maybe prevent us from having healthy, whole, really vulnerable relationships, or, prevent us from receiving the support that we need, etc. The 4 Ds of the dark are, and actually, I think I'll share, let me share, see, I haven't done this in a while. Share screen, it's the green button at the bottom. I could have just said share screen. There it is. So these are the 4 Ds of the dark. And okay, well, here we go. We'll just do it like this. This is from a slideshow that's in my course. That's the Change Light system. So the 4 Ds of the dark are disappointment, disapproval, disconnection, and danger. Okay, disappointment, disapproval, disconnection, and danger. Now, obviously, disappointment can take several different forms. So it could be, as I say here, unmet expectations, dashed hopes, mistakes, failures, and loss, feeling disappointed by a situation or a person, including yourself. I'm sorry, I'm going to take a moment actually to make this larger, because I'd rather, well, maybe here we go. I want to try to make this larger if I can. Oh, I guess I can't. Nope. Anyway, sorry, I was going to try to make it larger. I realized. Okay, my apologies. So we have disappointment, unmet expectations, dashed hopes, mistakes, failures, and loss. So anytime that we're feeling disappointed by a situation or a person, including ourselves. So think about this, and I've done a whole episode on disappointment and how much is embedded in that word. And that disappointment isn't just sort of like, she really disappointed me, or, oh, I really, that didn't turn out the way I wanted. That actually underneath that can be some really deep emotional stuff. Or even disappointment can take bigger forms, like, let's say, a parent that just perpetually doesn't show up for you. And that sense of disappointment, that chronic disappointment and expectation of disappointment that we feel. But it can also be when we're disappointed in ourselves. Maybe we tried really hard to succeed at something, do well on a test, or, be in a particular relationship with someone, and it didn't work. And so there's really deep, intense disappointment that can come from that. Or like, you're really, maybe, like when you're a kid and the first time you ever told a boy or girl that you liked them, and then maybe they said they didn't like you back, or they rejected you, or they made fun of you. That's some really deep disappointment. So the point is that is one of the conditions or experiences that we can have that causes an X power, causes a part of us to fall into darkness, to feel unsafe. Going back to that original concept of unsafe. When we feel disappointed, some part of us can feel unsafe or can see that we are unsafe or feeling unsafe in some way. Again, it could be unsafe in terms of relationships. It could be unsafe in terms of maybe we don't trust ourselves because we disappointed ourselves. Or, we had some kind of failure or loss, and we suddenly realized that, not everything is forever. And sometimes things don't turn out the way we want them to. So those are basically feelings and experiences. Those are experiences that can cause us or a part of us to feel unsafe in this way. The second one, disapproval. Easy, obvious criticism and judgment, or feelings that others are disappointed in you and that they basically disapprove of you, that you somehow haven't met their expectations, that you're not good enough, that you haven't done what they expected you to do or wanted you to do. Criticism and judgment, when we feel criticized, when we feel torn down, basically when we feel like we're not accepted as we are, who we are. That is that feeling of disapproval. We are disapproved of. Others judge us or they criticize us, and we feel bad about ourselves, and they make us, by their actions, can cause us or parts of us to feel bad about ourselves or bad about themselves, those parts feeling bad about themselves. And so what happens is, again, a part of us feels unsafe because we feel not accepted. Think about when you feel accepted. Think about what that feels like when you feel accepted, when you feel like you belong. Implicit in that is a sense of safety. Well, things like disapproval, experiences that made us feel like we were disapproved of, or maybe even disapproved of ourselves, or others criticized or judged us, can cause that sense of unsafety. Third one, disconnection, rejection and abandonment, or fear that others will reject or abandon you. I often say that we are wired for connection, and that our deepest desire, that everyone's deepest desire in some way or another, on some level or another, is connection. We all want to feel safely connected with each other, or actually also with ourselves, which is a lot of what this inner work is about. And so when we have an experience where there's a disconnection of some kind, even if it's a perceived disconnection or a fear of disconnection, that can cause a part of us to feel traumatized, to feel hurt, to feel rejected, to feel abandoned, thereby to feel unsafe in, with that person or with that group or in that situation or in life. The realization sometimes that some of us have as kids where we're like, you know what? This is not a place that is accepting and loving and kind and caring. And so a part of us can form that belief based on experiences. It's funny because it's not funny actually, when I say fear that others will reject or abandon you, what immediately popped into my head was actually an ex-boyfriend of mine who I dated in college. And I was so insecure at the time that I was terrified that he was going to reject me. Now, mind you, the only thing that tipped me off to this belief was just one day when we saw each other on our way to our respective classes, and he just wasn't as sort of warm and open and fuzzy and loving with me as he had been so many times before. And so that part of me that was terrified of rejection or being abandoned by him instead put up a wall, put up a defense, and decided to reject him first. And I ended up rejecting him, and I ended up being quite mean to him based on my own insecurity. But it was because that part of me felt unsafe, even though he hadn't necessarily done anything to make me feel unsafe. A part of me got triggered that was afraid that I was going to suddenly be unsafe, or that made me feel like I was unsafe in the relationship, like that it wasn't a forever connection, and that therefore caused me to end up rejecting him. So anyway, I just felt like sharing that story. I felt really bad. And then like 20 years later, I apologized to him because I felt so terrible. And I finally got around to doing that. So, and then finally, number 4 is danger. So danger is the most obvious one. When I talk about safety or unsafety and how safety is an absolute necessity for healing, well, then obviously the opposite of that is danger. Now, danger is where, we have such an extreme lack of safety. And that can be because of lack of adult protection or care, like when we were children, because of violation, where someone violated our boundaries or violated our trust or violated our space or violated our bodies, and actual outright violence. So a lack of physical safety and a sense of an attack on our survival, of a threat to our survival. So obviously that's the most obvious example of lack of safety, is something, situation where you're in danger. I want to add too, by the way, that when we're talking about danger or being in danger, it can also be the perception of being in danger, or even when we see that someone else has had some kind of violation or violence done against them, that triggers parts of us, or can parts of us, to then carry that sense of unsafety. Because when we see that happen to someone else, we think, oh my gosh, that could happen to us. Or if it's even in our environment, there's that sense of, oh my gosh, I'm not safe in this environment. And so, or I'm potentially not safe. You know, that person could hurt me, or even just that anybody could do that to anybody can be enough of like a sense of threat and fear that can cause parts of us to form X-powers to form inside of us. The reason why I went so, you know, kind of at length about the types of unsafety that cause X-powers to form is because it's important to understand what is it first and foremost that causes us to feel this way. Why do we have blocks and triggers? Why do we, you know, carry parts of, you know, have parts of us that carry those traumas? Why do we, you know, react certain ways to certain things? Why, etc. And it's because we have these parts of us that have formed in response to the actual reality or the perception of a lack of safety, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, you know, what have it, that, you know, in terms of relationships, in terms of our physical environment, in terms of our health, there are all kinds of experiences that we can have that cause us to feel unsafe. So by that token, then if we want to heal those parts of us, what makes sense? How do you undo that? If it's unsafety, lack of safety, or it's the parts feeling unsafe in some form or another, if that's what caused them to go into darkness, what's going to bring them back to light? Safety. Now, there are different forms of safety as well. And what I'm going to share with you are the 3 forms that I use when I am working in the drawing out process and I am taking an X-power, a trigger, a wound, a block, you know, parts of the ego, parts of the shadow, when I take it through the drawing out process. There are 3 basic ingredients. These aren't the steps, but these are the ingredients that I use, if you will, in every step through the whole process, because these are the ingredients that I have found to be the most effective and the most healing when you're trying to take a part of someone that's in darkness, that's scared, that's resistant, that's angry, that's you know, doubting, that's skeptical, that's even skeptical of me and resistant to me and telling me to F off. I mean, I've had plenty of these parts tell me to F off because they're like, we got it under control, lady. And so then what do you do? And how do you help that part feel safe so that it will come back to the light and transform back to its original essence? And then as a result, the person will feel more safe inside, more safe in their own skin. How do you do that? So the 3 ingredients that I use, very, very simple, but very, very powerful. The first one, and I actually don't have the slide for this right now. The first one is curiosity. Openness and curiosity. Consider what curiosity is. When you're curious about something, think of like what the energy of that is. Like if I'm curious about you and I'm showing curiosity towards you, what does that imply? Well, it implies openness. It implies openness to understanding you. It implies openness to hearing you. It implies that I'm asking you questions because I'm like, I want to know about you. And then what's the feeling that you get from me? Do you get that I'm rejecting you? Do you get that I'm trying to tell you off or that you're stupid? Do you get that I am, you know, an unsafe person for you? I mean, who knows? Maybe that could be part of it. But do you get any kind of resistance when someone's curious about you? No, curiosity is openness. Curiosity is opening a connection. It's seeking to understand. It's seeking to, it's seeking to you know, to get to know someone. But implicit in that is openness. It's non-resistance. It's receptivity. And if I'm receptive to you and I'm not resistant, then you're going to get this sense that, you know what, maybe I could be safe because I'm not pushing back on you. I'm not rejecting you. I'm open to you. So, well, maybe this is someone with whom I could feel safe. And not only that, they're actually inviting me to talk about myself. So I get to feel like I expressed myself and I can share how I feel and talk about what I think. And so that creates this space of a kind of safety that's about, one person being curious about another, and then that other person being sort of like, oh, okay, so here's an opening for me to actually be myself and express myself. So curiosity is key. And so, for example, when I'm working with an X-Power, I will ask a lot of questions. And I talk to that X-Power through the person. They're totally awake. I think I've explained this before. It's not hypnosis. I just call them by name, and then that part of them speaks. And they are, when I'm curious, I ask a lot of questions, and I ask it with a lot of, well, the second ingredient going into, so curiosity. So I ask with a lot of the other ingredients, but the point is that curiosity opens the ability for me to have number two, which is understanding. So if I can understand where you're coming from, or that X-Power is coming from, if I learn to understand its story, if I understand its perspective, if I understand how it got to be where it is and why it feels this way, that is key, because then that part inside feels understood. It feels heard and understood. And it's like, oh, this person gets me. And think about it, when you run into people like that, you're like, yeah, they really get it, or they really get me. How does that feel? And I will tell you that my physiological reaction is like, oh, yeah, wow, this feels really good. This person really gets me. So understanding is a key thing. So curiosity is basically an openness. Understanding is more of a mental thing. Yes, I understand where you're coming from. The third element that is so extremely key, and this will probably come as no surprise to most of you, especially those of you who are in any kind of emotional healing work, is empathy. That magic word that's all about being with someone where they are, empathizing with how they're feeling, not looking down on them, not looking up at them, but being with them, empathic. So feeling how they're feeling, or at least tuning in and understanding and being willing to be with them in their feeling, not fight the feeling, but validating that feeling. That is extremely key for healing. So we've got curiosity, which there's a sense of safety. Understanding, there's a sense of safety. This person gets me. They're not arguing with me. They're not trying to contradict me. They're not criticizing my point of view. They're understanding. And then empathy is, wow, they really also get how I'm feeling. They're not trying to suppress how I'm feeling. They're not telling me to feel any differently. They're allowing me to be where I am and feel how I feel, and just let that be. And not only that, they're validating those feelings. That's usually what happens when we're empathic with other people, is that we're also able to then say, yeah, I hear you. I understand. Gosh, that must be really hard. That must really hurt. Now, let me just point out here that when I work, just for fun, I feel like sharing this. When I work with an X-Power, I don't necessarily agree with its perception. I don't necessarily agree with its approach. If it's a mean inner critic, I definitely don't agree with it tearing the person down. But I can be curious, excuse me, open, open, curious. So curious and understanding and empathetic, so that it feels heard, feels understood, feels validated, feels expressed, feels safe, feeling however it feels and expressing however it feels. That's the kind of safety that is required, that is an absolute necessity for healing. And the reason why I say that too, when it comes to relationships or even physical healing or whatever, I mean, think about that too, like physical healing, for example. If you're putting a lot of toxic food in your body while your body's trying to heal something, well, then it's going to be a lot harder for your body to heal that illness or that injury. And so in a way, even then, if you put in healthy foods, you're creating a safer environment in which it can do its job, because it's not constantly trying to clear out the toxins or fight off the, the inflammation that's coming from the foods. So you see how safety can even be applied beyond emotional, emotional inner well-being. But I really wanted to just really reinforce this, because especially if, I'm just going to throw this out here. This is just what popped into my head. But sometimes, and especially in my work, I will have clients who come to me and they will say, I went to therapy for all these years and now I understand my issues, but I'm not, healed of them. I want them to be fixed. And then sometimes they'll share stories about what their therapist said. And I'm not trying to say anything against therapists. My mother's a psychotherapist. I adore her. She's amazing. She's a genius. But they'll say, well, my therapist made me feel like this, or my therapist said that. Now, of course, that can be that person's interpretation of what their therapist said or did or made them feel. So we don't know the therapist's perception. But sometimes there have been things where, they've been reported to me that I thought, wow. And I thought that is definitely not conducive to a safe environment. And so that's why that person may have, whether they were aware of it or not achieved the healing that they could have achieved with that therapist. There's also the sense of safety that comes when someone's been through what you're going through or similar to what you're going through. That's why we have support groups, right? These are people who get it. They understand. And of course, to have, full safety, you have to have healthy boundaries. I always say healthy relationships require healthy boundaries. And those boundaries, though, are often, if they're set in a healthy way, they are to establish and maintain a sense of safety. And that can be safety within oneself or safety within a group. So, for example, if you're in an AA group, I have a lot of friends in AA. If you're in an AA group, you're not allowed to go talking about who else is in the group. That's my understanding. You can't go sharing stories because it's established as a safe space. And by the same token, when I work with my clients and someone signs an agreement with me, I say it's confidential, and I'm not going to go talking about them. And I don't even say who my clients are, because that's a kind of safety. Not everybody wants others to know that they're working with me, that they have some really deep emotional struggles. So my point is that obviously boundaries are important for safety, but so we can establish that as another element for safety. But the whole point is to recognize how absolutely not just vital, but required, necessary safety is for healing, for your healing and for other people's healing. So consider that. You may consider that in terms of maybe some of the people who, you're working with professionally right now, whether it's, they're your clients or you're their client, or maybe it's even with people who are, in your business, or they're people that are, that you're doing business with. There can be different kinds of things that can cause us to feel unsafe. And the more we have those things that cause us to feel unsafe, obviously we're all built differently, and different things make us feel unsafe. But the harder it is to truly heal. I'm going to use another story, actually. I've got a couple minutes left. And that was, my mother, because she's brilliant, I was going through a really, really tough time physically. And I was living in an apartment where it was like something in the apartment was making me sick, and I didn't know what it was. But I was in such a down place and just demotivated place, but I was still trying to fight, and I was trying to get healthy no matter what. And I remember saying to my mother, now I'm going to say this to you and you're going to be like, okay, that's crazy thinking. Yes, it is. But the point is, I remember saying to my mother, she was like, Emily, I think there's something in that apartment that's making you sick. I think you need to get out of there. And I said, well, that may be the case, but I'm still going to work to get healthy. I'm still going to work to get healthy. And she goes, you know what, Emily, if I were working with a client who was in an abusive relationship, and they knew they were in an abusive relationship, and they said to me, no, but I'm still going to try to be stronger within myself, within this relationship, using the relationship as a kind of way to be stronger. She said, I forgot what she said she would say to that client, but she just basically was like, I would just say, I don't think that's a good idea. Because she said, because while you're trying to get healthy and whole and stronger, it's not helpful to feel unsafe, to feel attacked, to be in a very destabilizing and unsafe space. So just throwing that out there in terms of your own life, maybe there are some ways in which you're actually not feeling safe in a situation where you have, you should feel safe. And also if you're struggling with your own healing, and really recognize that those parts of you that are getting triggered or maybe causing issues for you, it's because they're there because they have felt unsafe. And so it's all about how do you help them feel more safe. And in terms of my work, I often teach people, well, be curious about those parts of you, be understanding towards those parts of you, understand that they're coming from a particular perspective because they formed out of an experience that you had, and they formed in response to that. And also, of course, empathize. That inner critic that's, maybe tearing you down, it's not about agreeing with what it's doing, but empathizing with an understanding like how it's scared that that you will get criticized if it doesn't do what it does. Again, not saying it's okay for it to treat you that way, but just sharing some of those tidbits about how you can also apply this to yourself, being curious about these parts of you, be understanding as they reveal themselves to you, and empathetic as they express their feelings. All right, safety, safety, safety is so, so key. And being and feeling and establishing as much safety as you can within your own life will absolutely accelerate your ability to feel safe, happy, and whole. All right, I hope this has been helpful. And as always, come to our Change Light community, take the Change Light course in which I talk about the 4 Ds of the dark, and in which we talk about, I take you through part of the drawing out process to heal those X powers. And yeah, lots of good stuff there, changelight.world. All right, thanks so much, and I'll see you again next week.